let's talk a little bit, since we have the staffing leaders, healthcare staffing leaders in the country. I really want to talk about what you all are doing to hire and attract your top talent. Because we are all in the staffing business. That's why we're in this room together for this week. But really talking about not just the physicians, right? So your recruiters finding the physicians for me, right? But also for your own teams. We dug into this, quite a bit as we prepped. But what are you doing? What are the other things? Work-life balance and remote and hybrid. But just I'd love to hear what you're having to do, need to do, to be reactive and proactive to have the talent you need to serve your HCOs. Liz, you want to go first?
Yeah, I think it really varies very much by agency what we've done. All of us went home, right, during the pandemic when we had to shelter at home, and we came back very quickly. So my organization has been back since about 3 or 4 months into the pandemic. We came back. We were really fortunate because we were in a brand new 23,000 square foot space, so I could space everybody out and we could be safe. But there are a lot of companies now that are fully remote or that are hybrid, and we don't have that model. It's just a personal preference. We think we're better together, and that's not to say that companies doing something else are wrong. But one of the things that we're up against now when we're hiring is that there are a lot of people that are like, oh, wait, I can't work 100% remote? Like, no, you have to come into the office. And that's been a bit of a challenge for us. So we've put together a flex days program. So our hire producers have a couple, either one full day or 2 half days that they can flex and work from home, just to be competitive. That's something we never would have contemplated doing several years ago.
Sure.
It just wouldn't have been an option. For us now to keep up, because there is such an influx of needs, locums needs now are higher than they were pre-pandemic, so we're doing a lot of internal hiring. One of the programs that we've done that has worked exceedingly well is our associate recruiter program. The vast majority of the people who participate in that are fresh out of college, and we bring them in. We're really their first job. They go through a 12-week training program, and then they're on the desk. And that's helped, we'll do like a class of 14 at a time. So that's helped us tremendously. But within our industry, it takes really 12 to 18 months for them to truly get up and running. It's not, and I can remember when I first came into locums, people telling me that. And I thought, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard. Somebody needs to be making an impact within 90 days. What's going on here? And then, you get into the industry, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I see it. There's just that much to learn, and there's all the individual nuances of the specialties that they have to learn. But I think, for all of us now, people who are hiring remote, now there's a much larger pool for them to pull from. If you used to work locally in your office, then somebody had to relocate to that state to work there, or they had to work locally. Now, if they can work remote, they really have the whole United States to choose from. So, that's been challenging.
Sure. So, Chris, I know you have had substantial growth at LT.
Yeah. So, I think for us, we're trying to solve for a lot of the same things that Liz described. Prior to the pandemic, probably had 95% of our staff on site every day, bricks and mortar. And so making that switch when the pandemic hit and we really shut everything down was an eye-opener for us. And we talked about this a little bit on the prep call. I think we learned kind of through that time period that we could be productive working remote. But really what it takes time to understand is what are the impacts to culture that has. So we've kind of waded in maybe a little bit more slowly. We do have a hybrid work model in place where we have flexibility for our salespeople, for our recruiters and our operations folks. but really trying to kind of dial in on and figure out when people are in the office, how do you make certain that they're getting value out of that time? And if you don't stage it correctly and they're in the office and they're on Teams calls all day with people who aren't,
That's my favorite.
then it just feels like maybe there's no reason to be there. So trying to get smart about that. We traditionally hire a lot of people who are right out of school, to Liz's point, kind of a similar model. And this Generation Z, I'm thinking about getting a reverse mentor, just somebody who can explain to me the way these things work. But they think differently, they learn differently, they learn from each other. They don't necessarily like being taught from the traditional way that we were taught. You're in a classroom and you're eager and you're ready to go. It's more peer-to-peer learning and things like that. And I'm vastly generalizing here, just a disclaimer. But they're also very tied to purpose, right? Which I think is a great opportunity for us to be able to articulate, like, hey, at the end of the day, you can make a great living, you can work with some really cool people, but really, if you do what you're supposed to do and you do it well, it means that somebody gets to see a doctor or an advanced practitioner. And that resonates. So I think that's an opportunity probably for all of us. Nobody used that if you're trying to recruit people that we're trying
Connect
to recruit.
to purpose. That's what we
But
call it.
yeah, connection to purpose. Yeah, you mentioned that before. But so yeah, it definitely has been a great learning experience. I mean, I'm kind of an old school caveman. I still like being in the office just because I like being able to kind of flip the switch when I leave. But certainly, I think flexibility is the key in tying to purpose.
So what are some of the backgrounds or the degree programs that those folks that you're hiring out of school? Because I did not go to school to be a recruiter. What are the programs that you?
I don't think anybody did.
So what are the programs that you have the most success with? I mean, is it MBA, business school, marketing, anything?
I hire bartenders.
Great.
Yeah.
I was a bartender.
I mean,
Can I get a job?
Yes.
Okay.
And again, I'm kind of tongue in cheek, half kidding, but I think someone with a PhD in something, sit there and make calls and make marketing, touches and things like that. But all kidding aside, I think more it's the ability to develop relationships, cultivate them, be consultative. I don't know. I think you kind of, you know it when you see it a little bit, and then when they start collaborating with their teammates. Like one of the things, and to piggyback a little bit with Chris, and I'm a Glenn Ross guy. You can't give the Alec Baldwin speech anymore. HR will be in 5 seconds. But I think what's missed is that the learning from peer to peer, and I know we talked about this a little bit in the prep as well, about the stats of how it's all going to kind of play out. I am really interested to see if you move forward this 3 to 5 years about how quickly people get up and running, because I will say this. When I entered the industry, I remember, L&D has come a long way in all of our organizations. I think there's been more of an investment in time and money pretty much across the board. But I remember the number one way that I learned how to overcome an objection or negotiate a difficult situation, or if there was a patient issue, was hearing other people around me. And if I'm sitting there with bunny slippers and pajamas on, I just don't know how that happens. Maybe technology's great and Zoom's great, and maybe I have too much gray hair. But
I'll be the contrarian. I totally think that, I can tell you CHG's position and then Leslie's position. So CHG's position is we are hybrid. You can do what you want. And some new hires do come in more, like we tend to have, but it's variable. If you're a division president, you're Aaron, you get to choose what you do. Comp Health does one thing, Aaron does another thing, fully remote. Weatherby does some mandated time in office, and we have like a little A/B test going on in our company, right? And we'll let you know how it goes. But I do think, if we don't, the world has permanently shifted. And it's what our physicians are telling us.
Yeah,
Their
so
world
that
has
makes-
permanently shifted. And so I just can't foresee a time that we're we're opposite of where Liz is, that we would ever have all our employees back in the office, even 4 days a week, even 3 days a week.
Yeah.
We have CHG employees now in 47 states. in the country. We've hired 1,000 people this year to support recruiting for your businesses, and they are everywhere, and it is working.
Yeah, I think I mean, there's benefits, right? Like what Liz said, it opens up your talent pool because they don't have to, they can live anywhere. They don't have to move. And then what I love is people that work in different time zones. You're on the East Coast time zone, you get a jump, you're up working here, right? And then you've got the people in California that are working here. So you really
I do think it's harder to be a leader of people in the circumstance because you have to change your approach to come to your person, and you have less capability of like management by walking around. And that is harder as a leader. And so since leaders are making lots of the decisions, it can be challenging. If your life has gotten harder, you want it to be easier generally, right? Like, and so I think we all have, it's just gonna be a moment, you know, I think our Gen Z, I call myself a millennial, I'm not, but I am, but I think it's gonna take them helping us learn how to do it.
Chris
and
needs a
letting
mentor.
us
Chris
shift.
needs a
Reverse
mentor. You heard
mentor.
that, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that, again, you let the data show what it shows,
Yeah.
right? You know, that's why we're not at a flat earth convention. You know, let's see what we got, and you know, let's move forward 3 to 5 years, and luckily you'll have the case studies as being a part of a larger organization.
Yeah, I think some of it, to point out though, so Liz's company is in Florida, right? Nice beach, all that, Matt, Florida, right? So if you're thinking, how do I attract people to work for me? Florida. They're in Georgia, and she's in Utah. So, you know, you have to think about that, where if you're trying to recruit
What
people.
you saying about Utah?
No, no, I'm
I'm
just
just
saying.
totally joking.
No one's in Missouri, right
one's
here,
in Missouri.
right?
There
No
you
one's
go.
in Missouri. So I think that that's something, too, that you have to think about. You broaden your talent pool when you can recruit like that nationally. But if you have a nice place that people are already moving to anyway, there are states that I have hospitals in or previously had hospitals in, you know, their population, their age is just declining, right? Because all of their kids, when they graduate from high school or college, anything, they leave, like in mass exodus. And so that can be a real problem.
Well, I know we're talking about our industry specifically, but I mean, it's happening in the labor market around the whole country. So it's not unique to just us that we're trying to solve this. I mean, you go from the Great Resignation to now the quiet quitting. And, you know, the Wall Street Journal this morning said 50% of American workforce is in the quiet quitting category. So you're talking, I don't know where they get these numbers, but Gallup did a poll of 15,000 people, and 1 out of every 2 people in the workforce are disengaged. So, I mean, that speaks to purpose, that speaks to a lot of things that we've covered, so it's not unique to our industry.
Right.
But the work from home presents challenges. We're having to pay more for internal people. So, I mean, there's all kinds of ramifications that come from this, and it's not just us. A lot of the people that are hiring, I mean, the turnover. So there's a productivity issue that we're speaking about, and how you lead people and how they learn how to recruit. There's all those issues, but then there's also the turnover issue, where, you know, somebody making a $50,000 base salary gets a call from somebody from the Silicon Valley, and they say, you can work from home, we'll pay you $120K. Just work from home. It's hard for that 24-year-old that's making $50K to say no to that. And then you just invested a year and a half to training them, and then you lose them.
Right.
So there's all kinds of those issues going on.
I think it points back to what Chris was saying about, I mean, all of us in our own ways, as my guests, are working on our culture in some way. And because you have to create, it has to be about something more than just the paycheck, right? And I think no matter where we are, I mean, how do you learn to create a culture that's hybrid? We all have some version of hybrid. We flex Fridays. So you're doing things way differently. Like, how do you connect in a way that makes someone connect to the company, not just their boss or their team, right? And so it's going to take hard work. I think it's kind of fun, actually, but it's not without stress.
Yeah, and I think a recent McKinsey study that they looked at, you know, work satisfaction, to your point, Tim, and 40% of workers, any industry across the country, you know, are considering changing jobs. That's not any different than the physician population, right? Everybody is looking. I think a lot of people talk too about, we got to get past, it's not the pizza party or the free t-shirt or the coupon for a coffee. Like, what else? Like we've said, connect to purpose, something greater than those things. It's fun to do Nurses Week activities around the hospital, and then whatever you gave them, like, it was immediately in the trash. You know, I mean, that's not what they, you know, they didn't want the little, there is a I think it was Duke, it was either Duke, it's one of the North Carolina or Virginia schools, they did that. Rocks, it's rocks, right? So they gave them all like a thank you rock, a pet rock, on their nurse's day or hospital week. And so they took, it was on all over Twitter, and they looked outside the hospital, and there's just thousands of rocks, because they were kind of like,
Sounds like a Duke idea.
well, for you, the UNC guys, sorry, I think
Go
it was
Heels.
Duke. I'm gonna look it up. But like things like that, right? What we've said, just moving beyond the we're trying to get deep.
Well,
Deep
and
with
by
these
the way,
people.
and I'm sure all of us do this in some form or fashion, but I think one thing that's powerful is when you do get the opportunity, you know, to get an email from a patient or a hospital partner, or because we get them fairly often, you know, that will say, you know, here's a picture of my son going to the prom, and he was in a car accident, and we didn't even know that he was being treated by a locum tenens physician. We didn't know what locum tenens physicians were, and we'll get this email, and then sometimes we'll go to a consultant, and then to share those stories, I think has a big impact.
Yeah.
That's one way I think you try to connect it to the why, you know what I mean? And that's, you know, I'm sure everybody's doing that. So
Yeah.